A very good evening to you. My name is Tom Watts, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our Engaging with AI event at St John's, Downshire Hill. AI is already transforming our lives, from the way we work and learn to how we make decisions, connect with others, and even understand ourselves. This evening, we want to dig into the many questions this raises. What exactly is AI? Should we be excited, alarmed, or both? What does it mean for jobs, justice, human identity? And what might a Christian perspective offer in the middle of it all? We hope tonight will be thought-provoking, accessible, and perhaps even a little unsettling in the best possible way. And before we go any further, yes, this is not the real me. This welcome is being delivered by an AI-generated avatar. Hopefully that puts us all in the right frame of mind to start asking questions. So, can we start with the microphone here? We're going to I'll just pass this along. If you start by each of you saying who you are, what you do in your kind of day job, and how AI has come onto your radar recently.
Sure, thanks, Tom. My name is Nate Burke. I'm the CEO of a tech and media company called Diginius. And I guess before that, I studied computer science over 30 years ago in the US, and then ran kind of a tech company in the US, and then now here in London for the last 15 years or so. I guess in the industry, we're known, we deal with all the major media companies, like Google, Meta, TikTok, all of these. But we're known in the industry as Microsoft Advertising's largest kind of partner globally. So we support over 1,000 digital marketing agencies in 60 countries on Microsoft Advertising. And Microsoft, as they are kind of leading the way in kind of AI across industry and companies and so forth, we coordinate with them quite a lot. We get a lot of questions from our partners, like how do I get my ads in the AI results? Or from kind of Microsoft, how do we incorporate AI generation into advertising or into our clients and companies and so forth. So it's, I was giving a talk a couple weeks ago in Brighton at a search conference, and I kind of started as like, hey, I'm really tired of talking about AI, because it seems like that's all people want to talk about in kind of these industry conferences and so forth. So yeah, it's quite a big topic.
Brilliant. Next, so Nate is the techie on the panel with that kind of expertise. Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Fernihough. I work for KPMG, which is a very large, it's like 275,000 around the world, audit, tax, and advisory company. And in the UK, I run the advisory practice, so that's the deals and consulting practice. And my connection to AI is just about, well, most of my day is now talking about AI and leading the company through what we're going to do in relation to AI. I would say I'm in the camp of it is going to be totally disruptive, or on the positive side, transformational to how our business is going to be run. We're already seeing the effects of it quite dramatically in what we've deployed. At the same time, we're trying to help our clients through the same thing, and specifically around how do you trust it? What are the ethics around it? What are the controls that need to be? And probably one of the biggest things we're working through is, what does it mean for a workforce? So if the technology is going to take 80% of what my job used to be, or number of people that we used to have, what do we do with our people? So that's probably the biggest thing that I'm working through right now.
Thanks, Lisa. So hi, everyone. I'm Jack Brooks. I am currently COO at a company called Deazy. So Deazy makes development easy. What we do is we help our clients build things like mobile apps, websites, website applications, things like that, using a network of software developers from around the world. So that's what we do. However, more and more so, we are now helping our clients with how they embed AI into their businesses and into their products. So that's what I'm thinking about on a daily basis. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, my background is in technology, but not a techie. So I think that's how to summarize it.
Thank you. My name is Robin Barfield. I'm a lecturer in practical theology and digital theology up at Oak Hill College, which is a theological college in Southgate, Cockfosters. So AI has come onto my radar because in teaching digital theology, that's quite a large part, and getting the students to think, well, what is it that we're using here? Not kind of what are the nuts and bolts of it, but actually what is it doing? What is it doing to us? What are we doing to it? What is it saying? And obviously a large part of that, my doctorate is in how children learn, and a large part of AI, and one of the perceived problems of AI is cheating in your GCSEs or your or your exams, and that thought that when a student submits an essay, is it actually their essay, or have they got ChatGPT to write it for them?
Great, fantastic. Well, let's get straight into definitions. So, Nate, can we start with you? Can you tell us from a technical perspective, but not too technical, what is AI? How would you define it?
I just happened to do a search on Copilot.
This is like, we're not going to get ChatGPT and Copilot to answer every question, but you're welcome to do that as we go.
From a technical perspective, it's the science and engineering of creating computer systems that perform tasks typically requiring human intelligence. So reasoning, language development, self-driving cars. I mean, there's all sorts of applications into it. But it's basically most of the AI stuff that people use now. I mean, people have been using it for a long time. If you have a Siri on your phone, or you have those, what is it? Alexa, all these kind of things. That's kind of a early version of AI. But it's all about taking data and the data set and processing large data sets to get an answer kind of quickly in a small version. I mean, technically, you kind of break it into little agents and you run it through these different things, and they make decisions and communicate and so forth. But it's really about just taking a large set of data and quickly being able to query that data a little bit differently than like Google and how those searches, 'cause it just kind of, Google search will just kind of give you a bunch of answers and websites, and what this does is in most of what we think of as AI, at least, it's a large language processor. I mean, there's different, like if you're talking how developers use it to write code, it's a little bit different, but most of what we're thinking about is large language models, where you just take and consolidate all this data and get the central answer. Or you're doing a self-driving car that's able to monitor everything that's going on and quickly process millions of data points very quickly in order to know where to go. But that's kind of the general part.
Brilliant. Robin, give us a sort of theological perspective on the same thing.
Yeah, so thank you. Kind of, what does that mean? I try and use 4 pictures for what AI is or means with the students. And the first one, what we see when you put something in ChatGPT, you're seeing sometimes the dark parts of the internet, right? But sometimes the really good parts of the internet. What's happening is humanity didn't live up to that. And there are 4 The word slave, this word robot comes from the Czech word for slave. And it's that idea that this is something that will work for us. So he may have heard Elon Musk, he says a lot of nonsense stuff, doesn't he? But he said, look, I think in 20 years' time, you won't need to do, nobody will need to work. Now, I think that speaks into our desire for purpose. What is it that you want from life? Do you want to never have to go to work again? And although you initially go, yeah, that sounds great. Actually, it's not, is it? You lose your sense of purpose. What am I here for? So those are the four pictures I use, just to try and help us understand what is it, what's it trying to do, what's it there for. So, what's it? So, a mirror, a man's playing out a zombie and a slave.
Great. And do you want to add anything from the sort of practitioner perspective?
I would just be slightly more positive. We've been through this, the two of us, and one of the things for me is it gives a real sense of awe. There is such amazing things that we can do with innovation, in this case, with technology, that we couldn't do. What we could do, it would take us a lot longer to get to those same things. So the one that comes to mind is the ability to translate. So we think about all the different countries in the world that don't have translations to the Bible. How amazing to be able to do that in a quick way. And my last work-related one is almost every week that my expert technologist comes and says, I'm just so amazed what we can now do with X or Y. And for me, that is a praise. I think there's some amazing things. It's dangerous, but I think it's awe-inspiring.
Yeah, I think I'm often simultaneously petrified of AI and also really excited by it. So, because we've worked with it for a couple of years, and as a company, we've saved years of time just by developing what we do every day. And obviously, that's great. That's bring us lots of value, bringing us lots of productivity gains and things like that. I do sometimes then start to question, well, why are we doing that? What were we doing it for? But overall, I do, at the moment, see it as a really useful and unbelievably powerful tool. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into it, but it does lead to slightly bigger questions as we kind of see where it's heading or where it potentially could lead.
Yeah, thank you very much. So let's dig into that a bit more in terms of what AI is actually telling us about what it means to be human. So if AI eventually claimed in some way to be conscious, what would that, if anything, would that say to us? Could we take that seriously as Christians? Who'd like to have a go at that? Do you want to tell us from a technical perspective what you perspective?
What I would do is pull the cord.
So unplug it. Yeah.
What is consciousness of human? It basically, I mean, this is discussed a lot. Like if you go to like a conference with Microsoft or a lot of people in the industry doing this at scale, at very, very large scale. And what they talk about is basically it takes all of this information and condenses to the middle view. So you got a central view of whatever that is. And so, and it's based on the data set. So if you go take a big data set from a lot of stuff, it's going to give you the view. If you take a small one, like you build a little agent to go crawl your LinkedIn profile to then create a personalized email to kind of reach out from a sales perspective. If you didn't update your LinkedIn thing for 20 years, well, it's going to give bad data. So garbage in, garbage out. One of the the fundamentals of technology. From a conscious point of view, the problem, I mean, the problem everybody talks about with AI is everybody now has it, so everybody's got the same abilities. So then it centralizes everything. What you then have to do is take the human element of creativity and find another way to get ahead, because it's not creative. It's very distilled. But that's what the technologists talk about.
Yeah. Okay.
I think in the technology world, it's people aren't. Well, it is a debate. I mean, Steve. So you go and look at what OpenAI. The reason we have this debate is because you had this open stuff, And that was created out of a debate between Elon Musk and Larry Page. And Google bought DeepMind and was creating all these things in DeepMind and keeping it secret. And Larry Page's view was that, hey, if there's a form of consciousness that surpasses human consciousness, then maybe it takes over, and that's evolution. And there were others like Elon Musk that said, no, this is too powerful, it needs to be open, so he donated $100 million to OpenAI to make it an open charity and let people do it. So, yeah, there is debate at the highest levels of these things of whether it can create consciousness or not. I'm of the degree that the human mind is a lot more complex than that, because it's not just a human mind. You're created in the image of God, and there's implications to that. It's not just an evolutionary scope. But if all you believe is an evolution, and that evolution is how everything works, then yeah, there's some issues to think about there. So.
Robin, do you want to comment on that?
So there's a fascinating episode of Black Mirror, if you've ever watched Black Mirror, where there's it's quite, I think it's season 2, episode 1, Be Right Back, I think it's called. And it's a young couple who've just got married. And he dies tragically and suddenly. And at the funeral, I think it is, somebody comes up to her and says, you know, there's a way of chatting to him. There's a AI program that will take his emails and his voice, and you can talk to him. And she initially goes, no. But she goes with it. And part of the question around that is this helpful for her grief? But then she has the body delivered. And so she basically has her husband back. But it ends with her getting angry with him and him not getting angry back. And the point for me of it was, humans are unpredictable. That is what makes us human. Humans are emotional creatures. We're not brains on a stick. So you might get that sense of consciousness as in self-awareness, but I don't think you're ever going to get a machine that truly loves, or a machine that gets frustrated, or a machine that gets sad, genuinely sad. You know, so when I come home from work, or my wife comes home from work, I don't know how she's going to react, because she might have had a brilliant day and it's fine. She might have had a terrible day and I've had a terrible day, in which case it's not brilliant. But that's not going to happen, as far as I'm aware, with AI, with AGI even. It might try to emulate that, but I don't think it'll ever be unpredictable. Because what is that unpredictable? That's not like jargon. AGI. Okay, apologies.
Just
all right.
To, just get that one in there. Yeah. What's AGI?
Okay, all right. So So what we have now is artificial narrow intelligence. That is, it can do narrow tasks like ChatGPT. You talk to it, it'll talk back, etc. Artificial general intelligence is bigger than that. It's a kind of humanoid.
Doing processes rather than just responding to requests, that kind of thing.
Agents, yeah. Do you want to say more?
Yeah, I would actually go, there's various views on AGI. Basically, some people say, actually, we've achieved it now, because if you ask ChatGPT general questions, it will generally give you a pretty good answer, and it will probably know a lot more than you do on many, 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 many topics. So that's one camp. Obviously, there is probably the Sam Altman camp, where he's going for kind of super intelligence in the sky, kind of godlike intelligence, I suppose, to go down that road. In my mind, going back to the original question, I think ultimately it is artificial, right? We're talking about artificial intelligence, what it means to be human. I think God creates humans. He gives us life, breath, emotions, creativity. If we boil down to what artificial intelligence is, it is ones, zeros, lots of lines of code, hosted on physical servers all around the world. And it's electrical signals being sent through computer chips. I'm sure Nate can probably expand more on what the actual technology is, but it's I think, that is the stark contrast. And so I think AI will be more and more capable. So it might well get to a point where if you're feeling a bit low after a rough day at work, it will empathize with you incredibly well. And I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg will claim that he's going to build AI bots that will help you with that kind of scenario. But yeah, and I suppose, yeah, the physical manifestation of what AI is, I think, demonstrates that it, is fundamentally not human.
Let's come on to work. So Lisa, tell us, should we see this as a big threat to the future of humanity, and suddenly no one's going to have a job, and that it's all terrible, or is there more to it than that? Where would you start with that?
So I think the world of work for many jobs will be quite different. We went through. We weren't around during the Industrial Revolution, but we have gone through offshoring and seeing jobs go to a different location. I would say even in that, there's still a lot of jobs that are onshore that we need to do. But this, I think, is going to be dramatic in terms of changing the world of work. I have a philosophy, and maybe it's just the optimist in me. We had an argument about this one, that we have struggled I'll just say in the UK, but you could say it in developed countries, to get the productivity gains that we had hoped to get with the onset of computers and internet and et cetera, and instead what's happened is we're just overwhelmed with more information, getting through all of that stuff as opposed to actually moving things forward. And I mean by moving things forward, getting properly to the end outcome or the task that you're trying to do. And so this, in my mind, allows us to do that. My examples are things like we do a forensic investigation when something has gone wrong in a company. Something that took us weeks to get through, we can now do in a matter of a couple days. What does that do? It actually helps our client see much more quickly what has gone wrong and fix it and address it and get on to the next thing. And I think that's just one example of the many things I think we can do in terms of being able to do more with the time that we have. The other thing I would say is it will create different and new jobs. So the thing I liken it to is when my niece graduated from university, the job that she took was not the same, did not exist when she started university. And so when she graduated, she became a social media coordinator for a furniture company. This is many years ago, but nevertheless, who would have ever thought that would be a thing when she started? And I think similarly with people in school today, we don't know what those jobs are exactly going to look like. There will be jobs that will be just quite different. So dealing with things like how do we build skills that are going to be useful, even if I don't know what the job type's going to be, is going to be important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Robin?
I was just going to chime in because we're currently doing a survey on this, but one area that's particularly being disrupted is my industry, so software development. I think if you read some of the hype and predictions, people are saying that software development will be dead in about a year's time. I think in reality that's highly unlikely, but it is an example of actually, if you look at some of the data coming out of the US on junior software development positions, it's quite significantly lower than it has been the last few years. Many people point to AI as a cause for that. But yeah, I think in the short and medium term, I'm probably with Lisa on this, and that is an incredibly powerful tool that I think could and probably should bring a lot of gain. In the longer term, I'm a little bit more skeptical in terms of I'm not convinced that it will create a bigger pie for the world's population, basically, for work. And I think there is an argument to say there might just be less pie for people to work from, and therefore we have to find other solutions to that issue of widespread unemployment. But I don't know if we want to get into that right now, but that is a bigger concern and a risk, and something that I think we need to all go into eyes wide open when dealing with it.
I mean, there are the people whose livelihoods were destroyed in the Industrial Revolution were the poorest, and it will be the same again. That there will be new jobs. I expect there'll be new jobs, but it's the people in the low-paid jobs now whose jobs are removed. You know, the secretaries, the clerks, the people who those jobs are just going to be obsolete. And actually, they don't have the money or they're not of the age to retrain. And I think there will be a real job for churches, actually, to care for the poorest, the vulnerable, and the weak who suddenly find they're no longer needed in the workplace. And so there's that ethical side. But on a bigger kind of level, there is a question of, in terms of productivity, what is our value? Do we just want to do more? Do we just want to keep being people who do more and more and more, quicker and quicker and quicker? Because that's where our world has gone. We now know we don't need to spend a day a week washing our clothes, thank goodness. But that's meant we fill the time with other things. So what are our values? What do we do to reclaim patience, slowness, space, what Christians might call Sabbath, in a world that is constantly getting faster and faster and faster and faster, and do more and do more and do more? I say that as somebody who's a big fan of a lot of AI, and there's a lot of good that I hope it will do, but it depends who does it. You know, nuclear energy can destroy entire continents, or it can provide cheap energy.
I guess a particular concern off the back of that is then the creative industries and the fear that this is going to remove the need for graphic designers and authors and all of that side of things as well.
And not only that, the theft.
Indeed.
You know, that sense in which if you're an artist, there's AI has probably been trained on your art. If you're a novelist, AI has probably been trained on your novels without having any payment, and now your need for art and novels is being removed. You know, that there are some big ethical questions there.
Do you want to come on that next?
My mom grew up by Dodge City, Kansas, with the Cowboys, and when she grew up, there was a farm on every quarter section, and the vibrant community and so forth. And then the big farming techniques came in. Farmers went bankrupt. They moved to the city. They got jobs in construction or whatever it was, and 80% of the farmers were gone. And then the ones that were left had big farms. That's what happened. That's kind of life, and whether or not we think that's moral or immoral, that's kind of what happens in a lot of industries. And so when something like this happens, it's irrelevant almost what I think, if it's good or bad. It's just happening. It's kind of like, an earthquake happens, you just deal with it. So when there's a new, and in technology, every few years there's a new thing. There's blockchain, then there's machine learning, then there's, this one's getting a lot of press. I think the next one that's coming is quantum computing. Yeah, they're making a lot of breakthroughs. So in 3 years, we're going to be sitting here talking about, how's quantum computing going to come? They're going to crack all my passwords. Everything's going to go, Y2K, the plane's going to crash. There's always, in any new technology revolution or any revolution, there's always the fear of what's going to happen. And then there's also, there's certain people are at the middle of it that are getting rich, and everybody else feels like they're paying a price. And so these are very valid concerns, and it doesn't help to stick your head in the sand and say, I'm not going to deal with it. I think in general, it's just like, no, we've got to get our heads around it and figure out what the implications are, how to deal with it, how to help others. But it is reality, I guess.
Great.
I was going to say in the arts, I think there are different levels of what AI can do that for sure will disrupt or take from artists. But I do think I don't see the ability, back to your point about humans and the unpredictability, the coming together with something totally not thought of before creating, I think I don't see AI coming anywhere near. So will there be lots of artists or people in the world of art needing to find a different way, or seeing AI come in and either disrupt or help? Probably, but I don't think that. I still think there's a room and there's a place that's well beyond what AI will ever get to.
I think as well there will probably be a growing trend, if that's the right word, of human authenticity. So some sort of like authentic stamp. This is made by a human, only by a human. How they define that, I don't know. But ultimately, I do think, and even now you're kind of seeing some of the reactions and some of the nervousness around these questions, that actually we need to have that ability to say this is human-made, which again raises some interesting questions of what it means to be human and interact with other humans. I would, just going back to, not to pick on Nate, but I am going to pick on Nate, around that kind of the Kansas farming analogy. I suppose that's assuming there's demand for construction in the cities. And, well, they went bankrupt in farming, right? And then they go do something. I suppose my overriding concern is in 20, 30, 40 years, or whatever it might be. The when question, up for debate. But is there going to be a point where AI is just so good at doing stuff that it then removes the need for any demand for work, for labour? And I think that is my overriding concern with this, is that if that is the direction of travel, how do we kind of prepare for it? And
you can probably imagine people looking forwards at the point of the Industrial Revolution, wondering if anything, what they were possibly going to do. And that's a valid argument. I think my counter to the, just again on Nate was mentioning like blockchain, I do actually agree quantum computing could probably speed up the rate of change within AI, but I think it's the scale and the speed at which AI is going that is different to. There's a reason why we didn't hold a panel questionnaire thing on blockchain, because it's just not as impactful. Whereas I think there's a reason why we're here. There's a reason why there is fear and excitement and opportunity. And I think underlying that, there is, it does ask some pretty existential questions in the way that I just don't think blockchain or maybe other more recent trends in technology have. So before we get into sort of have a break and have some questions from the floor, let's try and talk specifically about Christians and AI and where this Christian faith might have a particular perspective on AI. We're all,
okay. I was going to default to Robin. As I've got the mic, I'll hold it. I think as Christians we need to engage with this thoughtfully, carefully, but I still think we need to engage with it. I think it would be naive to kind of turn it off and say we're not touching it. I think that's not a good idea. And it's part of God's creation, is what I believe. So it's amazing creation. I'm wowed by what this technology can do.
It's a weird noise coming out of this, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Is it this? I don't know what it is. It's the AI.
Yeah.
So in the Christian worldview, we go back to the thing of what will happen, and you could play forward in your head all kinds of horrid things like no more work. But God created us for work. Work is good. God is in control. So if we look at innovation that happened in the Bible, and we read the similar book, they talked about bitumen, the tar that was used for on the ark, that meant that the ark could be waterproof and last as many days as it did. That was something that presumably didn't just show up. It was created, and it was a good thing. It was then used to help build the Tower of Babel, which that took it too far. And God intervened. So my worldview, based on the Bible, is that God is in control, and these scenarios that we can play out, that we do need to help make sure as Christian leaders and voices in our communities that we don't take this too far. Ultimately, if our voices aren't heard, God's voice will be heard.
So any technology is a tool, and a tool can be used for good or evil. I think the thing that worries me most about AI and development, it's not, it's actually a lot of engineers are losing their jobs, and there's actually quite a lot of jobs for electricians, and they're getting well paid more than others, and so I think the job market is not a real problem if you actually want to work. So working, but from a perspective where it goes, it's like, my dad was in engineering, and he said back, the things that drive engineering historically have been things like video games and pornography are some of the things that drive the innovation. And if you look at the dark side of AI and developing, even Meta is sexualizing chatbots and avatars and so forth. And so the emotional connections that people can make with these things and get into dark space of their mind.
Humanity and redemption, salvation, if you like. If we consider those three terms, firstly, we need to ask the question about creation, because the sheer amount of energy that AI is using is vast. When you hear about Google buying entire power stations, and the amount of water that is used to cool these things, I don't know how much energy it would have taken to make that video. The video that didn't even work. So for Christians, we have to be thoughtful and careful about the care of our planet, I think, when it comes to this. Now, it may be that AI solves that problem for us, possibly, but we need to be thoughtful. Humanity, going back to who do we want to be? These things are on offer for us. So the things I said things we say to our students when they start is, look, you can get a degree just by kind of carefully getting AI to answer all your exam and essay questions. But is that really why you're here? Is that really what you want? And that sense of you can get AI to do things for you, but it's asking the question, who do I want to be? What is this doing for me? Now, what do I want to spend my time and my thoughts doing here? And then that sense of salvation or redemption. The worst bit of technology I think that was probably ever invented was a horrific way of killing people in the 1st century by the Romans. That was the cross. What does God do with that? He utterly redeems it. And that sense in which, as Christians, we can look at some of the dark technologies and know that God is still sovereign, but we work for good through that. So approaching it as a Christian and saying, what is it doing to our planet? Who am I? What is it doing to me? And what is God doing through it? I think are probably the three questions I'd want to be asking.
Okay, we're going to take a pause there and help ourselves to refreshments, which are in the back corner over there. We've got about 5 minutes. The key thing is to have a look at, there's lots of amazing questions here, excellent questions. It would be lovely to get a sense of the ones that people are most interested in, because we're not going to be able to answer all of them in the time we have. So even if you haven't got a question yourself, do have a look at the link and do vote up the questions that you like the look of, and when we come back in a few minutes, we'll be able to address some of those. So here we go. So again, you can continue to ask questions and vote them up. That's the key thing. So vote for the ones. There's lots and lots with sort of 0 and 1 vote. So it'd be lovely to get a bit more differentiation. But there's one here with 5. Should we start with that then? Let's go with that, and that should come up. So here we go. Right. So how can we be sure that humans have the capacity to control AI if the AI development progresses faster than our prediction? Do you want that?
I'll start, and then you can...
Yeah.
Is it on? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because we were working on a model to address some work that we wanted it to do, and we were struggling for the model to come up with the accuracy level that we would be comfortable in using in this work. It was like we could get it at maximum kind of 70%. And then we built a model to help the model get more accurate, and it got up to 90%. So your point, I just use it as an illustration of, absolutely, I think there are things that the technology will do quicker, faster than sometimes the humans can. I think that what we have to do is have the safeguards around, we call it a trust framework around everything from the ethics, the law, the source of data, the transparency of what you're using. All those things need to be in there so that you can understand what's it basing it on, how is it coming up with it, and just like, okay, this is an accountant speaking, you can't trust a spreadsheet necessarily because humans do make mistakes and put the wrong thing in. You need to have someone who tests it to make sure that it's doing what it says. Same with the models. So although the things will do things faster, better, we still need to have a framework and a way to test it to make sure it's doing what we think we need it to do. And I think that has to maintain at the same pace.
Yeah.
I think my concern will be, even with a human framework, at some point, AI will probably be able to outsmart it, potentially, if we think of the trajectory in which it's going. I think if, I was reading today that the prediction for, if you think about like all of the kind of compute power that all these AI companies are using, over a half in 2027 will actually not be on the external deployment that average users like us use. It will actually be on research, R&D, and then training the models. So if you think about those two things as something for self-development of the models. So I think the question's a pretty apt one. I suppose, yeah, it's just, yeah, how do we know when there are little signals that demonstrate that the models are getting too clever for their own good, to put it another way? And that sounds a bit ridiculous, it sounds a bit sci-fi, but, well, according to some OpenAI researchers I was reading today, that's something that they're predicting. So I do think having the right safeguards in place, but also having the signals to spot those early signs is fundamental.
Okay. Go on. Yeah, go on then. Yeah.
In studying computer science back in the 90s, we did a lot of studying about AI and how it was going in the 70s. And in the 70s, it accelerated at a very rapid pace. And then it hit this level of complexity. And the problem is every advancement is an x squared. So it's very complex to get to the next level. And so it's kind of been stagnant, this whole AI thing. It's been going on 70 years. I mean, my dad told me he was in seminary when I was born, 1975, and he was working for a guy doing natural speech recognition 50 years ago. I mean, this stuff is not new. It's been going on for a long time. And what's changed is you've got these NVIDIA chips and you've got these big data sets, and all of a sudden they make breakthroughs in the speed of computing. But to get to another level, it's an x square. And so the level of complexity from a technology perspective is immense. And so you have people like Meta and all these guys that made advancement. Now they're really struggling to make it to the next level. So I just wouldn't expect it to continue to accelerate at that pace year after year after year.
Right, okay, thank you. Let's go on to this question. So, generative AI, i.e. large language model technology, is purely statistical. There is no semantics or understanding. So how can we say generative AI is intelligent? What does that word intelligent mean in that context? Robin, why don't you?
Artificial.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. If I'm honest, I don't know. I think I guess my question is artificial intelligence either artificial or intelligent? And I'm not sure it's either. Because it's not artificial because it's trained on us. That's the mirror thing. And I don't think it's intelligent either.
Because
it's not actually thinking. It is just saying like a large language model is just predicting the most likely next word and the most likely next sentence. It's not actually taking the whole and working it out and genuinely applying thought.
so
that is a
perhaps
human
this is
thing.
making us think about what's...
It's the algorithms predicting the best way to get from A to B, which is what we've asked it to do. But Nate, come back at me if you think because I saw you go.
Chat GPT, right? What is this? It's chat. They call these things chat bots for years, and it wasn't very exciting to help you with your airline reservation, talk back to you, whatever. All of a sudden they call it AI, and they open it up to normal people, and it's big. It's a chat bot for most of it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not,
Okay. Keep asking the questions if you think you want to come back on that. Again, this is again sort of connected. So, is AI actually just going to make us a lot more stupid? Because I think this is meant to say because we no longer have to go through the process ourselves of assimilating and distilling large data sets. So, all of these skills we're going to, and you could go beyond that to we're going to lose the skill of writing essays and all this sort of stuff that we think is what makes us intelligent. What do we think about that?
So I think there is a question in the workforce on how all of a sudden you bring people through if some of the knowledge of those who are checking it were because they did it themselves. But this is not a new phenomena. Again, I'll go back to when the spreadsheet came out, people said accountants would no longer be needed. We have more accountants because of the spreadsheets than we had before the spreadsheets were done. So I think I think we will have to find a way. I don't know yet what that is, but we'll have to find a way that we are that people learn and understand subject matter, processes, things, so that they can do the jobs to do the do the judgmental parts of the job as well. So it's not going to be you forget about it, because otherwise we're going to have a real problem in a few years' time.
On a slightly different topic, I think one of the skills that we will need to teach each other and learn is that of critical thinking. Because when you see a video of Keir Starmer telling you X or Y, how do you know it's Keir Starmer? How do you know it's not Tom Watts? And that takes intelligence, and we need to be. We're already diving into conspiracy theories, and this is making it worse. So that
agents being connected together, and that's a bit like the brain, isn't it? The brain is just a load of cells connected together and neurons firing, and maybe we're all just the same. What actually is the difference?
Yeah, I think I don't know if anyone's listened to this, but there was a Stephen Bartlett podcast recently, and one of the guests on that podcast was talking about basically evolutionary theory and how the algorithms that AI will get to will be so much better, so much stronger, so much more effective that eventually it will make humans extinct. And we are just another form of algorithm, basically, was their argument, which is really sad, actually, when you boil that down. And I think it goes back to what we've been discussing before about what it means to be human. And I think I would like to think at least Christianity gives a different worldview to what a lot of people are saying. I think people look at AI very materially, if that's the right phrase. And are we just other lines of code? No, because I think we've been created by God. You can point to other things other than the human genome that demonstrate that there is something beyond just us being cells, and that's all we are. We talked about things like emotion, music, like creativity, all these things that actually are really, really hard to make sense of. And I don't think, as far as I'm aware, science has really fully fleshed out what that means.
Any other comments?
Yeah. I think if we are, then we're no more important than a chicken. And we don't act that way because we eat chicken. We don't eat each other. There must be something more to us because we don't live as if that's all we were.
Thank you.
That's a phrase. We're not chickens. I will remember that one.
Okay, thank you. Great. Let's. Here we go. So is there anything to stop AI inventing an unstoppable supervirus to overtake the whole world's information and technology?
This is where we need a sci-fi person. I am not a sci-fi person. Who wants?
No. I mean, feed the data in and you run a sequencing thing, say, take all what we know about all the world and create a really nasty bug.
Yeah. Terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean,
but humans would have to do it.
Let's dig into that though. Can we give a Christian perspective on that question, because it's a question that keeps people up at night and terrifies us. I mean, Robin, what would you say about that? I mean,
yeah, thank you. I was actually asked this question by a student who works in AI, and that's his concern. Because this isn't like nuclear energy, which could only be run by governments. This is in teenage boys' bedrooms, right? And then you start going, this is a bit concerning, or could be. And his question was a theological one. Actually, would God allow us to wipe ourselves out? And we went, it was quite interesting kind of working it through as a Christian, because it's not an easy answer. It's not an easy thing. It wasn't something I'd been asked before. It wasn't something that's in the great big fat books that sit on my shelf. Where we got to was, well, look, Christians believe Jesus is going to return, and one of the lines in Scripture says, "Every eye will see him." That means people are going to be alive at his return. But that doesn't necessarily answer the question, because it could still be that we'd wipe ourselves out when he return as part of his return. So there's not a clear answer. One of my colleagues said, well, actually, possibly, that when you look at the ark in Genesis 6 to 9, God wipes out the earth by flood, promises never to do it again, but there's quite a lot about wiping out the earth by fire. So it's not a particularly nice answer to hear, but it's possible.
I guess what I'd add to this is that there are bad actors, and that it is concerning, and we should have controls and fight to have the right people, governance, etc. in place. But whether it's a super virus or someone takes over the defense systems, drones, or the nuclear power stations, or you can do really, really, really horrible things with technology. But you can do brilliant things. I mean, the opposite of this is we find cures for cancer. It is one of those things that it could go either way. What we need to do is, I guess, my view is pray and to work at getting in place the right controls, the right people to make decisions, and try and stop the bad actors.
I mean, from a Christian perspective, one of the, it says, do not worry about tomorrow, for each day has enough problems of its own. Fear is not a great place to be in, and to kind of work to train your focus and your mind and so forth to say, hey, I trust that whatever happens in this life, that it's, I'm secure in my relationship with Christ, or he created the world and it will happen. But you kind of get beyond that and say, don't worry about it, just deal with life every day. But fear of what could happen in any realm of life like that is not a productive way to put your mental energy, I guess. And from a technology, what's the next thing. You go on, you solve the next problem and solve the problem that's here today. And yeah, if you see somebody doing something, report it to the government.
Okay.
Or whoever.
Thank you. That's a really helpful thing. And in that sense, no different to all the other things that we might fear in the world. It's just another thing to add to the list, isn't it? And, but Christians have a God that we trust, and that it takes us to those verses you were talking about. Let's go on to this question here. So, the medical workforce is not represented on the panel. In that, none of us are doctors. I'm interested to know how the panel and audience feel about the use of AI by doctors and medical staff, seeing them, e.g. scribing diagnostics.
I don't know how I feel about it, but I know it's happening, and a lot of doctors you hear in there are very, very happy to take away a lot of admin.
So we did a joint survey with we being my company, with the University of Melbourne, and it surveyed 48,000 people over 47 countries, and it talked about the use of and the trust in AI, and it gave several examples, and one of it was around health care support. And what was interesting is the 5 countries with the greatest use of AI, and in that area, but others, were India, Nigeria, Egypt, China, and I think it was Saudi was the 5th one. And you think about some of those places, not all, but some of those, where it is harder to get to medical support. I mean, we live right next to the Royal Free, right? It's right at our door. But places where you don't have it, we were talking about, is it, even if it's not accurate, having something rather than nothing, would that be better? So I think it is definitely something that the use case, positive use case, has got to be brilliant. But we should have a doctor next time or nurse on the panel.
Great. Moving on to security. So it seems that a relatively small proportion of AI development goes into security and ethics. Given that the more powerful the tool, the more dangerous its misuse, how should we be responding?
Well, in business, a significant amount has gone in, and it continues to go into those topics. It's a critical thing. And in fact, our busiest people are our cyber technologists and our controls specialists. But I get the point of, in wider society, what needs to be there. And I think that's where we need to fight for things that help support getting those controls in place.
Yeah, I would agree. There is a large amount of security going into it, and that's also part of the, like, who do you trust? If you are using AI in different areas, like knowing what data you put in and who has access to that data and where it goes is quite important. Because yeah, it can. That's why some of these, like, people from a national security perspective, you don't necessarily want to use like a DeepSeek or some of the Chinese models, because you don't know where that data goes and who stores it and who retains it and what they keep about you. Whereas some of the other models are quite sophisticated in how they, well, one, either if you can download the actual models and store it on your own computer and run it in a local environment, so then you control it 100%. And then others are, they have kind of almost lock boxes where the query goes in, is processed, put back out, data is destroyed, and put it in. But yeah, there is a lot more than you would expect going into the security element.
Okay. What about innovation? So is all innovation based on previously known data, or can developments be truly new? Can AI be truly innovative? What do we mean by this? Is again making us think about the.
I think, yeah, going back to what we're using it for at the moment, it's a really useful tool. I think on more creative endeavours, currently I find that it struggles quite heavily. And yeah, I think it's still probably a question of when rather than if it could be innovative, in my mind. But At the moment, I think it's still quite far off. And I suppose it does depend on how you define what innovative looks like. It helped me identify what the biggest impact things to work on was. Is that innovation? Don't know. It's probably just good critical thinking and logical thinking. I think if you want it to be innovative and create a wonderful piece of art or a novel, I think it would struggle heavily.
I'll just say from the standpoint of the laws of nature exist in part of created world, and we talked about how you described the system of how it works, which has some similarities to how the brain works, and it works in a certain way, but it doesn't go beyond the law of nature. So from that point of view, it's not creating something beyond what's already set out in the law of how things work. However, it can take us, I think, in a step change in the combination of things or the sheer volume of things put together in a way that, creating a cure for cancer, as an example, that would be hugely innovative. Is all the information there? Potentially. And it would have to be put together in a different way than we've been able to conceive it so far.
Did anybody ever use Legos when they were kids? Yeah, or have the kids? Yeah. It's like, you could give one kid a box of Legos, another kid the exact same box of Legos, and what they come up with is going to be entirely different. One might be a mumbo jumbo of nothing, another be a beautiful cathedral. Same thing, you give two builders and two architects, two different, exact same budgets, materials, everything. They're going to create two different things. One of them might fall over because it wasn't engineered correctly. Another one might be a beautiful thing. Creativity, it's a tool, and it's in the hands of the creator that's going to be used well. And in this sense, it's in the hands of the user. On its own, no, but it's in the hands of whoever's using it.
Yeah. Okay. And there's one that a few people have wanted to go to. This is getting more theological again. So in terms of it being a tool, having said that AI is probably a tool employed by the Antichrist in future. So did somebody say that earlier? I don't know. But how can Christians be aware of that as a question? What might we...
Oh.
I mean, it's raising a number of different questions.
I don't think I said that. I certainly didn't mean that. I think it's back to that sense in which, Do
you want to explain what people might mean by Antichrist? Just because it's a jargon word. But,
I guess the Antichrist is a strange, a slightly hard to pin down concept in Scripture of. In fact, it talks about antichrists. It's plural of those who stand against Jesus. Is it used? So therefore, I would reject that idea, a tool employed by the Antichrist. Is it something that is used against Jesus and against Christians? Yes, it can be. But then so could any technology.
Yeah.
Is it a tool that can be used for the gospel, for Jesus, for telling people about Jesus, like Bible translation, for example? Yes, it can. So I, as with so many things, it can go both ways.
I guess it's one of those things where people have often read the Book of Revelation and said, barcodes are the sign of the beast, and it gets into how we read the Bible, because we're kind of looking for things going on in the world around us that match things in the Bible. And I guess is that a helpful way to be reading Scripture?
Yeah, and in the 1980s it was Russia, and in the 1990s it was Muslims, and it goes around. And actually, this Scripture is a document written. Well, New Testament is written mostly in the first century to Roman citizens and Jewish citizens who wouldn't have had a clue what AI meant, and it was written for them. It was written for us, but it was written for them. So I think it's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Personally.
And so, this one is then, again, connected to that. So is AI the ultimate idol? we seem to be trying to create a God.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that some of those desires that I mentioned at the beginning of wanting to know everything and wanting to be certain, anything good can be used. So if you're not a Christian, that idea of an idol is something good that we make the ultimate. So is AI good? It can be. Could we make it the ultimate? We could do, but it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be, but like anything else in the world,
yes,
any other tool, it could become that, but
yes.
It need not be the one big enemy of mankind.
I think so.
Anything to add?
You think of idols in the past of being inanimate objects. I think the thing that's interesting is the mimicking of a human or a being that AI can have that can lead us down to a path of, I've had this great conversation and you said, that I might fall in love with this thing or whatever, right? That I think that is a danger that it gets used as a substitute for a friend, a family member, it becomes a relationship and then becomes this kind of more all-powerful thing that you're worshipping.
Yeah, I mean, so I use the term a zombie. It's something that looks alive that isn't. One of the other terms that is used in some of the literature and the research is a golem. That is, it's an old Jewish, there's an old Jewish myth where they made a little creature out of clay and gave it life and it protected them. And there's a really interesting discussion where somebody talks to a large language model, an AI chatbot, saying, are you a golem? What's the difference between you and a golem? It almost seems to perceive itself as that kind of creature. But actually, in Jewish mythology, that was a good thing. It was protective. So, strange. Just thought I'd throw that in just to scatter your brains a bit more.
Let's finish with a question that Christians often ask, which is, can AI pray? Can AI write your Bible study for you? Can it write a sermon? Could we have an avatar deliver a sermon on the?
I can. So on my perspective on this is no. In short, we keep saying the phrase, but I think it is a really useful tool. But I think we need to be careful, particularly when we're thinking about Christianity and Christian ministry, especially. So, when we're thinking about what we do as Christians, we meet together physically in person, we pray, we talk to God, we read the Bible, we do things like that, and then we study the Bible and understand what it says. If you kind of think about all those different things, obviously, can AI replace us meeting together? No. And I don't think it's good to create agents that could help you do that. I think when we think about can it pray? No, because I don't think, as we've discussed, AI is human. I think where it starts to get a little blurred is when you're starting to use AI for Bible studies, help you prep Bible studies or help you prep sermons, or if Tom just gets his ChatGPT tool to just do me a sermon for this Sunday, it's on John 3, and then it writes out the sermon.
And then it preaches it on the screen.
And then preaches it on the screen, yeah, we can get rid of Tom. No, I think that this is where it gets, for me, the engagement of actually studying God's Word is a very important personal thing. And we're taught, aren't we, that that's how the Spirit works through His Word. And I think, there are probably, we were talking about it earlier, like some use cases that I think it can be a useful tool again. So if we're thinking about a sermon and coming up with a useful and important illustration to help get your point across, I think AI could be a useful research tool to help you give me a news article that demonstrates human selfishness or something, and it could help you do that. But I do think we have to be very, very careful about using it beyond those types of areas.
Yeah, I mean, I train preachers, and one of the arguments that we have is, can we use this? And normally it's a blunt question of, can I use ChatGPT to write in my sermon process? Again, it's kind of, well, what part? And if you just put in, write me a sermon on Noah's Ark, it'll be rubbish. It'll be absolutely terrible. But if you've done a lot of the hard work in the text yourself, and then you go and it's a conversation partner, and you're saying, I'm here, and I've got these ideas and these points. You know, what do you think? Help me to put them together better. It could be useful. It could be useful. Or, this is how I want to communicate it. Can you help me to communicate it better? Because I'm not a brilliant communicator. Possibly. But I think you need to be careful.
I was just going to say, I think it's interesting when there's enough of a body of work or materials on you as a preacher or me as a leader in my company or whatever it is, if I ask it to write for me a intro to my blog in the style of how Lisa would do it, on these 3 things, it will be brilliant and it will sound like me. But I haven't felt that that's, and if I do that, I feel like I need to be transparent and say, hey, I used AI to write this intro so people know that I've done that. I think the same thing in terms of a pastor or a preacher, that you would be transparent in how you've used it, just like you quote commentaries or other things you've looked at for it, so that there's some level of understanding of, how, because it helps us as well. How do we understand and learn and do our own study? So from that perspective, absolutely. But I think the slight difference is preaching of the word is inspired by God. And I think all of us would want to know that was therefore what the speaker, the preacher has been relying on ultimately in what he's sharing with all of us, or she's sharing.
Yeah, and I think the key thing there is something to do with it being a tool, isn't it? That if it's in an arsenal of tools, we've already got a load of tools that we use to do study and all the rest of it, and then we add that and we use it prayerfully, and we're in control, and all of that. That is a different thing from give me the sermon for next week and off I go.
Yeah, I was going to say, from a technical perspective, the question was, can it do this? And the answer is, from a technical, yes. Very simple. It can. Now, putting in the right data, and how would Martin Luther write a sermon, or how would John Calvin write a sermon? Use their body of work as the feed in. What would their perspective be on this? But then again, you get into a new job role, which is a prompt engineer. And that's one of these new jobs that are coming out that we talk about. Prompt engineering is quite a sophisticated topic, and you can actually start to get degrees in this. So if your kids are looking for a job, go look up prompt engineering, because it's a new job field that's quite quite good.
Yeah, so, that's the future, just writing the right prompt.
But the big difference in there is that this is still computing. It's still just data in, data out. It's garbage in, garbage out. It's not spiritual. These things are not creating spiritual bodies. That's a different realm. Okay. Well, it's 9:30. That's when we said we'd stop. We've got loads more questions, but I'm afraid we're not going to get to those. But we will be able to catch these guys on the way out. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk for a few more minutes. And just to say, it's been great to have everybody here. And if this has raised questions and interest, do come and see us on Sundays at 10:30 and 6 p.m. And our aim always is to be bringing God's word, the Bible, to bear on real life, just like we've been trying to do this evening, but see what all these things mean for our real lives today. So that's what we're about as a church. So do come and to join us if you haven't before. But for now, thanks very much to the panel. Let's give them a round of applause. And have a good evening.